Aliens laughed at the fat human in a Santa costume until he gave the alien prince the best gift. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The Galactic Winter Festival was the most prestigious cultural event in the known universe, held once every 10 cycles on the neutral grounds of Station Harmony. Ambassador Ethan Cole stood in the staging area, adjusting his red velvet suit and synthetic white beard, fully aware that he looked absolutely ridiculous by every conceivable standard. The staging area buzzed with delegates from hundreds of worlds, each preparing their cultural presentations. The Valorians polished their crystalline armor that sang with harmonic frequencies. The Tethrians rehearsed their plasma dance, weaving patterns of controlled fire through the air. The Andari prepared their gravity sculptures, warping space itself into art. And then there was Ethan, dressed as a figure from human mythology that nobody beyond Earth had ever heard of. He caught the reflection of himself in a polished panel. The padded red suit added considerable bulk to his already stocky frame. The black boots were slightly too large. The white beard kept slipping to one side. He looked, objectively speaking, like a joke. His assistant, Rachel Carter, a sharp young diplomat fresh from the Mars Academy, stood beside him with barely concealed concern on her face. "You're absolutely certain about this, Ambassador?" she asked for perhaps the 10th time that morning. Ethan adjusted his belt, which featured a buckle so large and shiny it could probably be seen from orbit. "Absolutely not," he replied cheerfully. "But it's too late to back out now." The laughter had started 3 days earlier, when word had spread through Station Harmony about the human presentation. The concept had been leaked somehow, probably by a gossipy maintenance drone, and the reaction had been swift and merciless. Delegates whispered in corridors. Junior attaches giggled behind their hands, or whatever appendages they used for concealment. Even the usually stoic Kandar delegation had been seen making what passed for amused gestures among their kind. The most vocal criticism came from the Vraxian contingent. The Vraxians were a proud warrior race, tall and imposing, with scales that shifted colors to reflect their emotions. They took the Winter Festival very seriously, seeing it as an opportunity to demonstrate cultural superiority. Their leader, Commander Thaxer, had made his opinions abundantly clear. Ethan had encountered him in the diplomatic lounge the previous evening. Thaxer's scales had been shifting between orange and yellow, the Vraxian equivalent of barely suppressed laughter. "I have heard about your presentation, human," Thaxer had said, his voice a deep rumble that turned heads across the lounge. "You plan to dress as an obese elder in primitive fabrics and distribute trinkets? This is how Earth chooses to represent itself?" "It's a tradition," Ethan had replied mildly. "We take our traditions seriously." Thaxer's scales had flashed bright yellow. "We take cultural integrity seriously. The Vraxians will present the ceremony of ascension, a ritual dating back 12,000 of your Earth years. And the humans will present, what did I hear it called? A fat man who breaks into dwellings through ventilation systems? He slides down chimneys, actually. And he's called Santa Claus, St. Nicholas, Father Christmas. Goes by a lot of names." The warrior's scales had shifted to a deep crimson, the color of utter disdain. "Your species was invited to this festival as a courtesy, as newcomers to the galactic community. I see now that invitation was premature. You lack the cultural depth necessary for this gathering." Ethan had simply smiled and sipped his drink, a gesture that seemed to infuriate Thaxer even more. The commander had stalked off, his scales rippling with irritation. But the Vraxians weren't Ethan's primary concern. His focus was on the guest of honor, Prince Kelleran of the Meridian Collective. The young prince, barely into his adolescence by Meridian standards, was the reason Ethan had pushed so hard for this particular presentation despite all the mockery. Prince Kelleran was dying. The medical details were complex, but Ethan had read every report he could access. The prince suffered from a degenerative neural condition that had baffled the best medical minds in the collective. He had perhaps 6 Earth months remaining. His father, Emperor Valtor, had brought him to the festival as one last experience of joy and culture before the inevitable. Ethan had seen holos of the prince. He was small for a Meridian, with the characteristic blue-gray skin and large expressive eyes of his species. In every image, Those eyes held a sadness that cut straight to Ethan's heart. The boy was only 13 cycles old, roughly equivalent to a 9-year-old human child. Rachel touched his arm, bringing him back to the present. "They're calling for us, Ambassador. We're up next." Ethan took a deep breath and picked up the large red sack he'd prepared. It clinked and rustled with its contents. Showtime. They walked toward the grand auditorium, passing other delegates who made little effort to hide their amusement. Two Andari actually floated aside, their gaseous forms rippling with what Ethan had learned to recognize as laughter. A group of Tethrian youngsters pointed and chittered excitedly, probably thinking this was some sort of comedy act. The auditorium was magnificent, a vast space that could accommodate thousands of beings in various atmospheric conditions. Specialized zones maintained different environments, separated by nearly invisible force fields. The stage at the center was designed to be visible from all angles, surrounded by rising tiers of seating that spiraled upward and outward. Every seat was filled. The winter festival drew enormous crowds, and everyone wanted to see what absurdity the humans would present. Ethan stepped onto the stage, and a wave of barely suppressed laughter rippled through the crowd. He could hear it, even through the translation fields. Clicks, whistles, rumbles, and hums in a dozen different frequencies, all expressing the same sentiment. Amusement, mockery, disbelief that this was Earth's cultural contribution. In the VIP section, suspended in a specialized environment sphere, sat Emperor Valtor and Prince Kelrin. The Emperor's face, or what passed for it among Meridians, was diplomatically neutral. But the Prince was staring at Ethan with open curiosity, those large eyes wider than ever. Ethan activated his translator and began. His voice boomed across the auditorium, carried by sophisticated audio systems that rendered it appropriately for each species present. Greetings to the assembled cultures of the galaxy. I am Ambassador Ethan Cole of Earth, and I am honored to share with you a tradition from my world. He gestured to his outfit. I know I may look unusual to you. Believe me, I look unusual to many humans too. But what I represent is bigger than how I look. I represent a tradition of giving, of joy, of thinking about others instead of ourselves. More laughter. Someone in the Vraxian section made a comment that caused others to rumble with amusement. Ethan continued, undeterred. On Earth, during our winter season, we celebrate a figure called Santa Claus. The tradition varies across our cultures, but the core is the same. One night a year, this jolly old man travels the world, delivering gifts to children. Not for payment, not for recognition, simply because bringing joy to others is its own reward. A Kandar delegate called out, her voice synthesized through her translator. Your species has faster-than-light travel, and you still tell stories of a man using primitive animal-drawn vehicles? We do, Ethan confirmed. Because the story isn't about the logistics. It's about the spirit of generosity. It's about maintaining wonder and magic in a universe that can sometimes seem cold and calculated. It's about preserving childhood innocence for as long as possible. He turned toward the VIP section, looking directly at Prince Kelrin. And speaking of childhood, I have something special planned. Your Majesty, if you would permit me, I would like to invite Prince Kelrin to the stage. The auditorium fell silent. This was highly irregular. The royal family was never asked to participate in presentations. Emperor Valtor's expression was unreadable, but after a long moment, he gestured his approval. An attendant helped the prince from his sphere, providing him with a portable atmosphere unit. Kelrin moved slowly, his movements careful and deliberate, the way someone moves when their body doesn't quite work the way it should. He approached the stage with what looked like a mixture of fear and excitement. Ethan knelt down to be at eye level with the boy. Hello, Prince Kelrin. Have you been good this year? The prince's translator rendered his soft voice. I have tried to be, though I have been angry sometimes. At being sick. At not being able to do things other children do. Ethan nodded solemnly. That's understandable. Being angry about unfair things doesn't make you bad. It makes you honest. And Santa appreciates honesty. He reached into his sack. Now, I happen to know that you've been very good, so I have some presents for you. The word presents was translated, but seemed to confuse the boy. Ethan pulled out the first item, a carefully wrapped package. Open it. Kelrin's thin fingers fumbled with the wrapping. His people didn't use decorative coverings for items. The concept was foreign, but he managed to tear through the paper, revealing what was inside. A book, but not just any book. This is a collection of Earth's greatest children's stories, Ethan explained. Tales of adventure, magic, friendship, and hope. I had it specially printed with pages that won't degrade in your atmospheric conditions, and the text is in your language. There are stories here about children who overcame impossible odds, who found courage they didn't know they had, who made true friends in the unlikeliest places. The prince held the book reverently, his large eyes scanning the colorful cover that showed a young human child riding a dragon. His fingers traced the embossed title. Ethan pulled out another package. And this is something we call a snow globe. He shook the sphere, and artificial snow swirled inside, settling around a tiny scene of a human village in winter. On Earth, many children believe Santa lives at the North Pole, in a land of ice and snow. This is what that looks like. When you shake it, you make your own little snowstorm. Kelrin shook the globe carefully, mesmerized by the swirling particles. On his homeworld, the Meridian Collective's core planet, weather was carefully controlled. Natural phenomena like snowstorms were things of distant history. A small sound escaped him, something between a gasp and a laugh. The audience was quieter now, watching intently. Ethan continued pulling items from his sack. A stuffed toy in the shape of an earth bear, soft and huggable, designed to provide comfort. A puzzle box that would challenge the prince's obviously sharp mind while he was confined to bed. A music player loaded with gentle earth melodies. Everything from classical symphonies to soft acoustic songs that might ease pain and help him sleep. And then Ethan pulled out the final gift. It was larger than the others, a carefully sealed container. This one is special, Prince Kelrin. Inside this is something called a terrarium. It's a tiny ecosystem from Earth, completely self-contained. There are plants, insects, even a small water cycle. It's a little piece of my world that you can watch and care for. Living things that will depend on you. Why does that matter? The prince asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because, Ethan said gently, when we care for other living things, we're reminded that life is precious, that every moment matters, that even small creatures have their place in the universe and deserve kindness. And sometimes, when we're going through hard times, helping something else helps us too. He paused, then added in an even softer voice. I know you're sick, Kelrin. I know it's scary and it's not fair. But I want you to have these things because you deserve joy. You deserve magic. You deserve to be a kid, not just a prince or a patient. Just a kid who gets presents from Santa. Kelrin looked up at him, and there were tears forming in those large eyes. Meridians could cry, Ethan knew from his research. They rarely did in public. But the prince's face was wet with tears that sparkled strangely under the stage lights. Nobody ever, he started, his voice breaking. Nobody treats me like a regular child anymore. They treat me like I'm already gone. Like I'm fragile. Like I'm just a sad story. Ethan felt his own eyes burning. Well, Santa doesn't care about sad stories. He cares about good kids who deserve presents. And you, Prince Kelrin, have been very, very good. The prince threw his arms around Ethan, the portable atmosphere unit whirring to adjust. Ethan hugged him back, this dying child from a world he'd never seen, and felt the boy's small body shaking with sobs. The auditorium was completely silent now. Not a whisper, not a movement. After a long moment, Kelrin pulled back. He hesitated. Can I tell you what I really want? What I wish Santa could bring me? Of course. I want my father to smile again. The prince looked back at the VIP section where Emperor Valtor sat motionless. He hasn't smiled since I got sick. He tries to be strong for me, but I can see how sad he is. I want him to remember how to be happy, even if I don't, even if I'm not here anymore. Ethan's throat was tight. He glanced at the Emperor and saw that the powerful leader of the Meridian Collective was completely still, his face unreadable, but his body language screaming of barely contained emotion. That's the most selfless wish I've ever heard, Ethan said. But here's what Santa knows that maybe you haven't learned yet. Your father will smile again because of you. Maybe not today or tomorrow. But every time he remembers these moments, every time he thinks about how brave and kind his son was, he'll smile. You're giving him that gift right now, just by being who you are. Kelrin nodded slowly, processing this. Then he looked at the pile of gifts. Can I take these back to show my father? Absolutely. They're yours. As attendants came to help gather the gifts and escort the prince back to his seat, Kelrin turned back one more time. Ambassador Cole? Thank you. I believe in Santa now. Ethan watched him go, then turned to face the audience. His vision was blurry, and he realized he was crying. He didn't bother to hide it. This, he said, his voice rough with emotion, is what Santa represents. Not the flying reindeer or the magical workshop. Not the impossible logistics or the fantastical elements. Santa represents the idea that we should give to others, especially children, without expecting anything in return. That we should preserve wonder and joy and magic for as long as we possibly can. That every child, no matter who they are or where they come from or what challenges they face, deserves to feel special, deserves to feel seen, deserves to feel loved. He looked around at the assembled delegates. You can laugh at my costume. You can mock the story, but don't mock the principle. Because every species here, every culture represented in this room, has children. And every one of those children deserves what I just tried to give Prince Kelrin. They deserve joy. They deserve hope. They deserve magic. He picked up his now empty sack. That's what Earth brings to this festival. Not the most ancient tradition. Not the most technologically impressive display. Just a simple reminder that sometimes the best thing we can do is make a child smile. Ethan gave a small bow and walked off the stage. Rachel met him in the wings, her own eyes red and wet. She started, then couldn't finish. I know I probably just destroyed my diplomatic career, Ethan said, pulling off the fake beard. But I don't care. Are you kidding? Rachel laughed through her tears. Look at them. Ethan looked back at the auditorium. The silence had broken, but not with laughter. Species that didn't normally display emotion openly were visibly moved. He saw a Tethrian mother holding her child close. A group of Kandar delegates were making the gesture that indicated deep respect among their kind. Even the Andari, who generally considered themselves above such displays, seemed to be glowing a softer, warmer color. And in the VIP section, Emperor Valtor had left his seat and was in the prince's sphere, holding his son close while Kelrin showed him each gift with unbridled excitement. The Emperor's face, still mostly unreadable to someone unfamiliar with Meridian expressions, showed something that might have been the beginning of a smile. Commander Thaxter approached backstage. His scales a color Ethan had never seen on a Vraxian before. A sort of deep purple shot through with silver threads. Ambassador Cole, the warrior said formally, I owe you an apology. What I witnessed today was not a lack of cultural depth. It was cultural depth I was too rigid to recognize. The Vraxian people value strength, honor, and tradition. I see now that there are many forms of strength. What you did for that child required tremendous courage. Ethan shook the commander's offered hand. No apology necessary. I know I looked ridiculous. You look like a human concept my translator is struggling with. Thaxter frowned at his device. It's rendering it as foolish wisdom or joyful absurdity. But the core meaning seems to be someone who is willing to appear ridiculous in service of something greater than themselves. We'd call that being a good sport, Ethan said with a grin. Or maybe just being Santa Claus. Over the next several hours, something remarkable happened. Delegates from dozens of worlds approached Ethan, many with questions about the Santa tradition. But more significantly, many wanted to tell him about their own cultural practices around gift-giving, around celebrating children, around preserving innocence and wonder. A Tethrian elder explained their festival of first flames, where adults would create small, safe fires for children to play with, teaching them about both the power and responsibility that came with growing up. An Andari philosopher discussed their floating day when youngsters were allowed to experience zero gravity as a rite of passage. A Kandar mother described their naming ceremony, where the entire community would present a child with gifts representing the traits they hoped the child would develop. Each culture had something, some tradition, some practice, some way of honoring their young. Ethan realized that what he'd tapped into wasn't uniquely human at all. It was universal. Every intelligent species, no matter how different their biology or history, eventually developed ways to celebrate and protect their children. They just expressed it differently. The next morning, Ethan received a formal invitation to meet with Emperor Valtor. He was escorted to the imperial suite by Meridian guards who treated him with surprising deference. The suite was magnificent, adapted to Meridian atmospheric requirements, but featuring viewport windows that showed the majesty of the surrounding star system. Emperor Valtor stood by one of these windows, his back to the door. Kelrin sat nearby, carefully tending to the terrarium Ethan had given him, his face pressed close to the glass as he watched the tiny insects moving about. Ambassador Cole, the Emperor said without turning, I am told that in human cultures, when someone does a service of great personal significance, thanks are expressed. Your Majesty, there's no need to thank me. I just wanted to give your son a good experience. You gave him more than that. Valtor finally turned, and Ethan could see that the Emperor had indeed been crying. Meridian tear ducts left silvery trails on their skin that lingered for hours. You gave him normalcy. You treated him like a child, not a tragedy waiting to happen. Do you know how rare that has become? I can imagine. Can you? The Emperor's voice held an edge of bitterness. Every doctor, every visitor, every dignitary who comes to see him treats him with such careful pity. They speak in hushed tones. They offer condolences for a death that hasn't happened yet. They've already begun mourning him while he's still alive, still here, still my son. His voice broke on the last word. Ethan waited, giving him space to compose himself. But you, Valtor continued, you saw him. Just him. A child who deserved presence and joy and the undivided attention of a silly human in an absurd costume. You didn't treat him like he was dying. You treated him like he was living. Because he is living, Ethan said firmly. Every moment he's still here, he's alive. And those moments matter. They count. They're real. The Emperor nodded slowly. My people have a saying. Roughly translated, it means the brightest stars burn briefly. We say it about those who die young, as if their brief time somehow makes them more special, more intense. I have always hated that saying. It's cold comfort to tell a parent their child is a bright star when all they want is more time. Ethan moved to stand beside the Emperor at the window. On Earth, we have a similar saying. We say it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. He paused. I think both sayings are trying to cope with the same terrible truth. That sometimes, no matter how much we love someone, no matter how powerful we are or how advanced our technology, we can't save them. All we can do is love them while we have them. And give them snow globes, Valtor said with what might have been the ghost of a smile. And give them snow globes, Ethan agreed. Your Majesty, can I ask you something? Of course. What makes Kelrin happy? Not what made him happy before he got sick. What makes him happy now today? The Emperor thought for a long moment. He loves stories. He always has. Even now, weak as he is, he'll listen to tales for hours. Adventure stories, especially. Stories where the hero goes on impossible journeys. Then tell him stories, Ethan said simply. Every day, tell him about the history of your people. Tell him about your own childhood. Make up ridiculous adventures where he's the hero. Let him dictate stories to you. Fill his remaining time with so many stories that he'll never run out of things to dream about. Valtor looked at him strangely. Our doctors say we should keep him calm. Avoid excitement. Let him rest. With respect to your doctors, rest is for people who have a future to save their energy for. Kelrin doesn't have that luxury. So fill his days with as much life, as much excitement, as much joy as his little body can handle. Let him be exhausted from happiness, not from boredom. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. Then he said, You speak with the authority of experience. Have you lost a child, Ambassador? Ethan shook his head. No, but I lost my sister when I was young. She was only 7. She had a disease not unlike your son's. Something that didn't have a cure, not then. He took a shaky breath. And I remember, toward the end, everyone was so focused on keeping her comfortable, keeping her quiet, letting her rest. And she was so bored, so frustrated. All she wanted was to play, to have adventures, to be a kid. But everyone treated her like she was made of glass. And did you? Treat her like glass? Ethan smiled, remembering. No, I snuck into her room at night, and we'd play pirates. I'd make up elaborate stories about her being a pirate captain, sailing the 7 seas, finding treasure, fighting sea monsters. She couldn't get out of bed, but in her imagination, she was sailing the world. He wiped his eyes. She died happy, tired and sick, but happy. And when I think about her now, I don't just remember the sadness. I remember the laughter. I remember her smile. I remember her as a pirate captain, not a patient. Valtor turned to look at his son, who was now holding the snow globe up to the light, watching the particles swirl. He looks happy. He does. Thank you, Ambassador Cole. For the gifts. For the wisdom. For seeing my son. That's what Santa does, Ethan said. He sees children. Really sees them. 2 days later, the Winter Festival concluded with an awards ceremony. Various presentations were recognized for different qualities. The Vraxians won for most historically significant tradition. The Tethrians won for most visually spectacular display. The Ondari won for most philosophically profound contribution. And Earth won the newly created award for most impactful cultural exchange. The award was presented by none other than Emperor Valtor himself, with Prince Kelrin at his side, clutching his stuffed Earth bear. When Ethan approached the stage to accept the award, he was still wearing his Santa costume. He'd worn it every day of the festival after his presentation, and it had become something of a symbol. Children of various species had started approaching him, asking about Earth, asking about Santa, asking if he had any more presents. He did, of course. He'd started carrying candy in his pockets, simple Earth sweets that were safe for most carbon-based species. He'd handed out dozens of pieces, each time taking a moment to talk to the child, to ask their name, to treat them as individuals. Ambassador Cole, Emperor Valtor said formally as Ethan reached the stage. On behalf of the galactic community, I present you with this recognition. Your presentation reminded us all of something we had forgotten in our pursuit of impressive displays and ancient traditions. You reminded us why we share our cultures at all. Not to compete, not to demonstrate superiority, but to find the common threads that bind us together as intelligent, feeling beings who care for our young. The Emperor paused, then added in a softer voice, and on behalf of my family, I thank you for giving my son a gift more precious than any treasure in the galaxy. You gave him joy. You gave him normalcy. You gave him magic. He looked down at Kelrin. You gave him Santa Claus. Prince Kelrin stepped forward, his movements still careful, but his eyes bright. Ambassador Cole, I have something for you too. He held out a small package wrapped in shimmering meridian fabric. Ethan knelt down and accepted it. Can I open it now? Please do. Inside was a handmade bracelet, woven from threads that changed color in the light. Meridian friendship bracelets were sacred things, given only to those considered part of one's family. Ethan's throat tightened as he realized what this meant. I made it myself, Kelrin said proudly. It took me 3 days because my hands shake sometimes. But I wanted you to have it. Because you're my friend. And because Santa needs something to remember me by too. Ethan carefully tied the bracelet around his wrist. I will treasure this forever, Prince Kelrin. And I will never forget you. Good, the prince said with a smile that transformed his small face. Because I'm going to write to you. I'm going to tell you stories, like you told my father to tell me. I'm going to write about my adventures, even if they're just adventures in my imagination. And maybe you can write back and tell me more about Earth and Santa and all the things humans do. I would be honored, Ethan said. In fact, how about this? Every Earth year, on the day we celebrate Santa, I'll send you a present. No matter where I am in the galaxy, I'll be your personal Santa Claus. Really? The prince's eyes went wide. You promise? I promise. Santa always keeps his promises. The audience erupted in applause, a cacophony of sounds from 100 different species, all expressing approval and emotion in their own ways. Ethan stood, still holding the prince's small hand, and raised their joined hands in the air. The image was captured by 1,000 recording devices and would be transmitted across the galaxy. The fat human in the ridiculous red suit, standing triumphant with a dying alien prince, both of them smiling as if they'd just shared the greatest secret in the universe. Later that evening, as the festival grounds began to empty and delegates prepared to return to their respective worlds, Ethan sat alone in the human delegation's quarters. Rachel had gone to file reports and handle the administrative aftermath of their unexpected award. Ethan was supposed to be packing, but instead he sat by the window, looking out at the stars and thinking about everything that had happened. There was a soft chime at the door. Come in, he called. Commander Thaxter entered, looking somewhat uncomfortable. His scales were shifting between colors, betraying his uncertainty. Ambassador, I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Commander. Please sit. The Vraxian settled into a reinforced chair, specially designed to accommodate his species' bulk. I wanted to speak with you before we depart. About what you did. About what I said before your presentation. You already apologized, Ethan said. No need to revisit it. I apologize for underestimating your presentation. Thaxter corrected. But I need to apologize for something deeper. For my rigidity. For my assumption that strength only looks one way. For my belief that cultural value could be measured by age and tradition alone. He leaned forward, his scales settling into a steady, deep blue. I have 3 children, Ambassador. 2 sons and a daughter. They are all young by Vraxian standards, still learning our ways. And watching you with Prince Kelleran, I realized something. I have been so focused on teaching them to be strong, to be warriors, to uphold our traditions, that I have forgotten to simply play with them. To be silly with them. To give them joy without purpose or lesson attached. It's never too late to start, Ethan said gently. Isn't it? I am a military commander. I have responsibilities. I have a reputation. I cannot simply appear before my children in a costume and hand out trinkets. Why not? Thaxter's scales flashed with surprise. Because it would be undignified. Because it would undermine my authority. Because it would be, he struggled for the word, foolish. Ethan smiled. Let me tell you something about human parents, Commander. The best ones, the ones kids remember most fondly, are willing to be foolish. They dress up for costume parties. They make silly voices when reading bedtime stories. They dance ridiculously at weddings. They embarrass themselves in public because making their kid laugh matters more than maintaining dignity. But I am a military leader. My people look to me as an example of Vraxian strength. And what's stronger? Maintaining a rigid image, or loving your children enough to risk that image? Ethan asked. Your kids won't remember you being dignified, Commander. They'll remember you being present, being engaged, being theirs. Thaxter sat in silence for a long time, processing this. Finally, he stood. You have given me much to think about, Ambassador. Perhaps the human Santa tradition is not as foolish as I initially believed. It's completely foolish, Ethan said with a grin. That's the point. Being a good parent sometimes means being willing to look foolish. After Thaxter left, Ethan finally began packing. He carefully folded the Santa suit, running his hand over the red velvet. It had been his father's suit, worn by him every Christmas to hand out presents at the local children's hospital. When his father had died 5 years ago, Ethan had inherited the suit, along with a letter explaining the importance of carrying on the tradition in whatever way he could. His father had never met Ethan's sister. She'd died long before his father remarried and had Ethan. But his father had known about her, known about those pirate adventures, and he'd understood what Ethan had learned at such a young age. That sometimes the best gift you can give is your time, your attention, and your willingness to be present in someone else's joy. Ambassador Cole? Rachel's voice came through the comm system. You have an incoming transmission. It's flagged as urgent. Patch it through. The screen flickered to life, showing a Meridian medical officer. Ambassador, I'm sorry to contact you so late. But Emperor Valtor wanted you to know immediately. He said you'd want to hear this. Ethan's heart dropped. Is it Kelleran? Yes, sir. The officer's face, difficult to read as always, seemed to show something like wonder. We ran another neural scan this evening. Standard protocol. But the results were unexpected. What do you mean? The degeneration has stopped. Completely stopped. We've run the scan 3 times to confirm. There's even signs of minor regeneration in some areas. It's not a cure, Ambassador. He's not suddenly healthy. But the progression has halted. Where we expected him to have mere months, he may now have years. Perhaps many years. Ethan sat down heavily. How is that possible? We don't know. The officer hesitated. The Emperor wanted me to tell you what he believes. He says it's because his son has hope again. Has joy again. Has something to look forward to. He says you gave his son a reason to fight, and that fighting spirit has made a difference we can measure in neural activity and tissue response. Or it could just be a spontaneous remission, Ethan said, trying to be rational. Those happen sometimes, don't they? Rarely. Very rarely. And never after such consistent decline. But yes, it's possible this is coincidence. The officer paused. The Emperor doesn't believe in coincidence, Ambassador. He believes in Santa Claus. After the call ended, Ethan sat in the dark for a long time, turning the bracelet Kelleran had made him, watching the threads shift colors in the faint light. He thought about hope, about joy, about the power of believing in magic even when you're old enough to know better. Maybe the medical officer was right, and it was just spontaneous remission. Maybe Kelrin's neural condition had simply decided, for no reason science could explain, to stop killing him. Maybe it was all just luck and timing and had nothing to do with snow globes or stuffed bears or the fat human in a Santa suit who decided to treat a dying prince like a regular kid. Or maybe, just maybe, there was something to the magic after all. The next morning, as the human delegation prepared to board their transport back to Earth, a crowd had gathered. Word of Prince Kelrin's medical improvement had spread through Station Harmony like wildfire, and somehow people had connected it to Ethan's presentation, to the Santa tradition, to the simple act of giving gifts with no expectation of return. Children of a dozen different species lined the corridors, some with their parents, some from the station's resident population. They held signs, or the alien equivalent of signs, many with crude drawings of a human figure in red. As Ethan walked past in his Santa suit, which he decided to wear one final time, the children called out to him in their various languages, all translated by his device. Santa, is it true you can do magic? Santa, will you visit my planet? Can Santa come to everyone, not just humans? Ethan stopped walking and looked at these young faces, these children from worlds he'd never seen, species he'd only recently learned about. He thought about what to say, how to explain the spirit of Santa without claiming actual magic or making promises he couldn't keep. Then he smiled and said, Santa can't visit everyone personally. But here's the secret. Anyone can be Santa. All you have to do is give someone a gift for no reason except to make them happy. It doesn't have to be expensive or fancy. It just has to be thoughtful. It just has to show that you care. He looked at the parents watching from behind their children. And grown-ups can be Santa too. Maybe especially grown-ups. Because you have the power to give the greatest gift of all, your time and attention and love. A small Tethrian child, barely old enough to control her flame, stepped forward. I want to be Santa. Can I be Santa? Absolutely, Ethan said, kneeling down to her level. You can be the first Tethrian Santa. You can start your own tradition. What gift would you want to give? The child thought hard, her flame flickering with concentration. I would give warmth to people who are cold, not just cold in body, but cold in heart. Lonely people, sad people. I would give them my flame to warm them. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes again. That's perfect. That's exactly what Santa would do. One by one, children stepped forward with ideas. A Kandar child wanted to give music to people who couldn't hear well. An Ondari wanted to give beauty, creating gravity sculptures for hospitals and care facilities. A Vraxian child, probably from Commander Thaxer's crew, wanted to give protection, standing guard so other kids could play safely. Each child had their own interpretation, their own way of being Santa, filtered through their culture and biology and understanding of the world. And Ethan encouraged every single one, seeing in their eager faces the universal truth he'd uncovered, that every species, every culture, every intelligent being eventually discovers the profound satisfaction of giving to others. Rachel touched his arm. Ambassador, we really need to board. We're going to miss our departure window. Ethan nodded and stood, addressing the crowd one final time. Remember, being Santa isn't about the costume or the sleigh or any of that. It's about the spirit. It's about kindness. It's about thinking of others. It's about making the world, or the galaxy, a little bit brighter. You can all do that. You can all be Santa. As they walked toward the transport, Rachel said quietly, You know you've probably just started a galactic religious movement, right? Ethan laughed. Not a religion. Just a tradition. A good tradition. The media coverage of the festival was extensive. Ethan's presentation became the most watched cultural exchange in the event's history. Clips of him with Prince Kelrin circulated on information networks across dozens of worlds. Analysis and commentary poured in from scholars, politicians, and religious leaders. Some praised him for finding common ground across species. Some criticized him for trivializing serious cultural exchange with children's stories. Some wrote lengthy treatises about the psychological and sociological implications of gift-giving traditions across different species. And some simply shared stories about their own cultural practices that echoed the Santa spirit. But the most significant response came from the children. Within weeks, reports started filtering back to Earth about spontaneous Santa movements on other worlds. Tethrian children creating warmth exchanges, where they'd gift small flames to neighbors who seemed lonely. Kendar youth organizing music circles in medical facilities. Ondari youngsters making small gravity sculptures to brighten public spaces. Vraxian children taking shifts as voluntary guards at playgrounds and schools, ensuring safe play. It wasn't uniform. It wasn't organized. But it was spreading. This idea that young beings could make a difference through small acts of kindness and generosity. Adults watched, bemused at first, then increasingly moved. Some joined in. Some started organizing and supporting these efforts. Some created formal programs around the concept. Commander Thaxter sent Ethan a message 6 weeks after the festival. It was a video of himself, standing in what appeared to be his family quarters, wearing something that looked like armor but was clearly decorative rather than functional. His scales were a warm orange, indicating happiness and affection. His 3 children surrounded him, laughing as he told them an exaggerated story about a great Vraxian warrior who traveled the galaxy, giving gifts of strength and courage to young warriors. "Your foolish wisdom has infected my house," Ambassador Thaxter's message read. "My dignity is destroyed. My children now expect absurdity and playfulness. They demand stories every night. They have enlisted me in their protection gift program, standing guard at their education center. I am a commander reduced to watching younglings play, and I have never been happier. Thank you for showing me strength I didn't know I lacked." Emperor Valter's updates on Prince Kelleran came regularly. The boy was thriving in ways that baffled his medical team. He wasn't cured, they emphasized. The condition was still there, still a threat. But it was dormant, sleeping, and Kelleran was living. The prince sent Ethan letters, long rambling messages filled with stories about his adventures in imagination. About the books he was reading. About the terrarium and how he'd learned the names of every insect. About the snow globe that sat by his bed and how he'd shake it every morning to start his day with a little bit of earth magic. Ethan wrote back every time, long responses filled with encouragement and new stories. He sent more gifts for various human holidays, each time choosing things that would spark Kelleran's imagination or bring him comfort. A kaleidoscope, a music box, a set of smooth river stones that fit perfectly in a small hand. Simple things that meant you're seen, you're valued, you matter. On the first anniversary of the Winter Festival, Ethan received an invitation to return to Station Harmony for a special ceremony. The Galactic Council had decided to make the Santa tradition an official part of future festivals. They were creating the Santa Pavilion, a space where any species could share their own gift-giving traditions, where children could meet and exchange ideas about generosity and kindness. They wanted Ethan to officially open it. He almost declined. It felt too much like taking credit for something that wasn't really his. Santa Claus, in all his various forms across Earth cultures, had existed long before Ethan put on the suit. And the spirit of generosity existed across every culture, every world. He hadn't invented anything. He'd just reminded people of something they already knew. But Rachel convinced him. "You have to go," she insisted. "Not because you deserve credit, but because your presence will mean something to all those kids who've taken up the mantle. You'll show them that adults take their efforts seriously. That gift-giving and kindness aren't just childish things to be outgrown." So Ethan returned to Station Harmony, once again wearing the red suit, once again looking absolutely ridiculous by any objective standard. But this time, when he walked through the corridors, he wasn't met with mockery. He was met with recognition, with respect, with children of a dozen species calling out greetings and showing him their own versions of Santa costumes. The Santa Pavilion was beautiful, a sweeping space decorated with representations of gift-giving traditions from hundreds of worlds. There were displays showing the Tethrian Festival of First Flames, the Ondari Floating Day, the Kandar naming ceremony. And right in the center, given pride of place, was a recreation of a human living room at Christmas, complete with a decorated tree, stockings hung by a fireplace, and wrapped presents underneath. Prince Kelleran was there for the opening, standing at his father's side. He'd grown in the past year, gotten stronger. He still moved carefully, still tired easily, but there was life in his eyes that hadn't been there before. When he saw Ethan, he broke away from his father and actually ran, across the pavilion floor. "Santa, you came. You really came." Ethan caught him in a hug, feeling how much more solid the boy felt, how much more present. "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? And Santa always keeps his promises." "I've been good this year," Kelren said breathlessly. "Really good. I've been helping other sick kids, telling them about hope and magic and not giving up. I've been their Santa." Ethan felt his eyes burning again, a familiar sensation when dealing with this remarkable child. "That's the best gift you could give. How do you feel?" "Tired sometimes. Weak sometimes. But alive, Ambassador. I feel alive." He pulled back and looked up at Ethan with those enormous eyes. "The doctors say I might live to be grown up now. Can you believe that? I might get old. That's the best news I've heard in a long time." "I know it might not last," the prince said, suddenly serious. "I know the sickness might come back, but I'm not scared anymore. Because you taught me that every moment counts. Every moment is worth living. Whether I have months or years or decades, I'm going to live every single one of them." "That's all any of us can do," Ethan said softly. The opening ceremony was surprisingly emotional. Leaders from various worlds spoke about the impact of the Santa tradition on their societies, about communities coming together, about children learning empathy and generosity, about adults rediscovering the joy of giving without expectation of return. But the most powerful moment came when Emperor Valtor took the stage. The powerful leader of the Meridian Collective stood before the assembled delegates and did something unprecedented. He knelt down, getting on his knees before everyone, and looked directly at Ethan. "Ambassador Cole," he said, his voice carrying across the pavilion. "1 year ago, my son was dying and I was dying with him. Not in body, but in spirit. I had given up hope. I was simply waiting for the inevitable, trying to make his last days comfortable but not meaningful. And then you appeared in that ridiculous costume and showed me that I was wrong. That every day mattered. That my son deserved joy, not just comfort. That hope and magic and wonder were not childish things to be set aside in the face of harsh reality, but essential tools for survival." He stood, his voice stronger now. "You gave my son years he wasn't supposed to have. Whether through medical miracle or the power of hope or sheer force of will sparked by joy, it doesn't matter. You gave us time. You gave us life. You gave us the greatest gift imaginable. And I wanted to say, before all these assembled beings, thank you. Thank you for being foolish enough to believe in magic. Thank you for being brave enough to look silly. Thank you for being Santa Claus." The Emperor reached into his robes and pulled out a medallion, the highest civilian honor in the Meridian Collective. "I present you with this recognition, not as ambassador to Earth, but as Prince Kelren's Santa, as the human who saved my son by reminding him how to live." Ethan accepted the medallion with shaking hands, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. When he finally found his voice, he said, "I don't deserve this, Your Majesty. I just gave some presents to a child." "You gave hope to a dying boy and his father," Valtor said. "You reminded an entire galaxy that kindness matters, that generosity matters, that taking the time to make someone smile matters. If that doesn't deserve recognition, I don't know what does." That evening, after the official ceremonies ended, Ethan found himself sitting in the recreated human living room in the pavilion, surrounded by children from dozens of worlds. They sat in a circle around him, some on the floor, some floating, some perched on specialized furniture for their particular biology. "Tell us a story, Santa," a young Andari said. "Tell us about Earth Christmas." So Ethan did. He told them about snow falling gently on quiet streets, about families gathering together to share meals and exchange gifts, about children waking early to find presents under trees, about the belief in magic that persisted despite all logic and reason, about the joy of giving to others and seeing their faces light up with happiness. And as he spoke, he watched these young faces from alien worlds hang on every word, their eyes wide with wonder. He saw how the story transcended species and biology and culture, how the fundamental truth of it, the core message of love and generosity and hope, resonated with everyone regardless of where they came from. When he finished, a small Vraxian child raised her hand. "Santa, is it true that Christmas only happens once a year on Earth?" "That's right. One day a year, we celebrate. That seems sad, the child said. Why not celebrate being nice to each other every day? Ethan smiled. You know what? You're absolutely right. We should. And maybe that's the real magic of Santa. Not that he comes once a year, but that he reminds us to carry that spirit of generosity through all the other days too. Another child spoke up. I'm going to be Santa every day. I'm going to find one person every single day and give them something, even if it's just a smile or a kind word. Because everyone deserves to feel special. That's perfect, Ethan said. That's exactly what the world needs. What the galaxy needs. More everyday Santas. More people choosing kindness. More beings deciding that making others happy is worth the effort. As the children dispersed, returning to their parents or guardians, Prince Kelrin lingered behind. He approached Ethan slowly, holding something carefully in his hands. I made you something, the prince said. It took me all year. Well, me and my father together. We worked on it. He held out a small sculpture, exquisitely crafted from some material that seemed to shift between states, solid and liquid and gaseous all at once. It depicted a human figure in a flowing coat, surrounded by children of various species, all reaching toward him with expressions of joy and wonder. It's beautiful, Ethan whispered. Kelrin, this is incredible. It's us, the prince explained. The Santa Pavilion. But also every moment like this. Every time someone shares kindness. Every time someone gives a gift for no reason except love. That's what you taught me, Ambassador. That these moments are real. They matter. They're worth preserving. Ethan took the sculpture carefully, feeling its strange texture, watching the way it seemed to glow with an inner light. I will treasure this forever. Good, Kelrin said, because I'm going to keep making them. Every year, I'm going to make a new one, showing different moments of Santa's spirit from around the galaxy. And someday, when I'm old, they'll fill a whole gallery. The Gallery of Giving, I'll call it. A place where people can remember that kindness matters. That sounds like a wonderful dream. It's not a dream, Ambassador. It's a promise. Just like you promised to be my Santa. The prince smiled. I'm promising to be Santa too. For as long as I live. Years passed. Ethan returned to Earth and resumed his duties, but he never forgot his time at the Winter Festival. He kept the Santa suit in his closet, pulling it out not just for special occasions, but for quiet moments when he needed to remember what mattered. He maintained correspondence with Prince Kelrin, who defied every medical prediction and continued to grow stronger. The boy became a young man, then a respected leader in his own right. He never forgot his promise. The Gallery of Giving opened when he turned 25 cycles old, filled with hundreds of sculptures depicting moments of kindness and generosity from across the known galaxy. The Santa tradition spread further than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't universal, not every world or culture adopted it, but enough did that it became recognized throughout the galactic community as a symbol of cross-species goodwill. Diplomatic missions started, including cultural exchange programs specifically designed around gift-giving traditions. Medical facilities incorporated gift and visitation programs modeled after the Earth Christmas tradition. Schools taught about the importance of generosity alongside other core values. And every year, at the Winter Festival, the Santa Pavilion hosted a gathering where beings from hundreds of worlds came together to share their stories of kindness, their traditions of giving, their experiences of being Santa to someone who needed it. Ethan attended when he could, always in his red suit, always ready with a pocket full of Earth candies to hand out to children. He watched with quiet satisfaction as the tradition he'd carried from his father, who'd carried it from the broader human culture, who developed it over thousands of years of learning how to be good to each other, spread across the stars. He never claimed credit for starting a movement. He always maintained that he'd simply reminded people of something they already knew. But those who'd been there, who'd seen him kneel before a dying prince and offer him joy instead of pity, who'd watched him face mockery with a smile and persist in his mission of spreading kindness, they knew better. Commander Thaxter, who remained a friend for the rest of Ethan's life, perhaps said it best in a speech he gave at Ethan's retirement ceremony. Ambassador Cole didn't give us Santa Claus. He gave us permission to be foolish for a good cause. He gave us permission to prioritize joy over dignity. He gave us permission to believe in magic even when we're too old and too serious and too important to believe in anything so childish. And in doing so, He gave us back a part of ourselves we'd forgotten we'd lost. The part that remembers how to play, how to give, how to love without condition or expectation. Ethan lived to a ripe old age, long enough to see the Santa tradition become so embedded in galactic culture that children who weren't even born when he made his famous presentation knew the story of the human Santa and the Meridian Prince. Long enough to attend Kelren's coronation as emperor, watching with pride as his young friend took power and immediately announced a sweeping program of cultural exchanges and charitable initiatives. Long enough to hold his own grandchildren and pass down the red suit, along with the story of why it mattered. And when he died, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 93, the news rippled across the galaxy. Tributes poured in from hundreds of worlds. But the most touching came from the Meridian Collective, where Emperor Kelren declared an official day of remembrance, a holiday dedicated to honoring the human who had taught a dying boy how to live and, in doing so, taught a galaxy how to be kind. The Santa Pavilion, which had grown into a massive complex spanning multiple levels of station harmony, was renamed the Coal Pavilion. A statue was erected in the center, depicting Ethan in his red suit, kneeling before a small Meridian child, offering a snow globe. The inscription read, in a dozen languages, "He believed in magic. He taught us to believe too." But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from the children. In the weeks following Ethan's death, young beings from across the galaxy engaged in coordinated acts of kindness. They called it the Great Giving, and it lasted for an entire month. Millions of children, inspired by the human Santa's legacy, went out of their way to be generous, to be kind, to make others smile. They gave gifts. They gave time. They gave attention and care and love. They became Santa, every single one of them, carrying forward a tradition that had started with an awkward human in a ridiculous costume and a dying prince who'd learned to hope. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Ethan Cole smiled. Because that had always been the point. Not the costume, not the presents, not even the tradition itself. The point was the spirit behind it all. The simple, profound truth that making others happy makes the universe a little bit brighter. That when we give without expecting anything in return, when we choose kindness even when it costs us our dignity, when we believe in magic even when logic tells us we shouldn't, we become something greater than ourselves. We become Santa Claus. We become hope made manifest. We become the light that pushes back the darkness. And that light, once kindled, never truly goes out. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.